Wasabi Wallet. Unfairly private.
If you are just getting into Bitcoin and you've had some decent teachers along the way, you will know that self-custody or holding your own Bitcoin is a paramount pillar of being a good Bitcoiner. Contrary to the typical advice of legacy finance, wherein you leave your money with a trusted third party, that is not the most secure option when it comes to Bitcoin. So you want to get your Bitcoin into your own Bitcoin wallet. And with that, you're going to want a hardware wallet to keep your funds safe and offline. But which device do you choose? Which hardware wallet is best? Well, today we're going to be taking a look at my top 6 Bitcoin hardware wallets for 2022. And hopefully, through this all, you will have enough information to decide which one is best for you. I am Ben with the BTC Sessions, and this is your daily session.
Hodl the Bitcoin.
Before we dive in, quick shout out to sponsors of the show, Shakepay.com. If you're in Canada and you are buying Bitcoin, this is one of the easiest and best ways to do it. No deposit fees, no withdrawal fees. And after your first $100 purchase using the link down below, they'll give you $30 for free to stack some extra sats. On top of that, if you use the same link for your friends, then you get the same deal, $30 each. And after you've referred a friend with your own link, then you get to shake your phone every single day for free sats. They also have a sats back Visa card that you can earn more Bitcoin on everyday purchases. Be sure to check them out in the links in the show notes. LEDN.io allows you to use your Bitcoin for a variety of different services. In particular, if you're in a pinch and you need dollars, but you don't want to sell your Bitcoin because, of course, that's a taxable event and you may be worried about having to buy back in at a higher price, this could be for you because you can deposit Bitcoin here, get a loan of dollars to your bank account within 24 hours, and when you pay back those dollars, you get back the same amount of Bitcoin. They also have savings accounts for your Bitcoin or USDC, and they have their B2X offering if you're feeling mega bullish. Check them out down below. I do live on Bitcoin, and Bitrefill helps me a ton with this because they've got every conceivable gift card, and you can buy them all with Bitcoin, both on-chain with regular transactions or using the Lightning Network as I do for those fast and cheap transactions. You do earn sats back as you spend, and they have a killer referral program as well that helps you stack even more if you get some friends and family in on these gift card deals. I highly recommend you check them out, and they are available in a ton of different countries. Keystone is one of my favorite and most used hardware wallets, as you'll see in the tutorial or this breakdown list later on. I'm not going to talk about them too much here, and you will hear plenty about them in this video. And finally, if you're backing up any important hardware wallet, any of the ones on the list here, you're going to want to get it extra secure. Paper does not cut it because you are susceptible to things like fire damage, water damage, or if it's just a slip of paper sitting around, you could accidentally, or somebody you know could accidentally discard it. Put those fears aside and put it in solid steel with something like the BillFodl over at privacypros.io. All of those worries tend to go away. And this is how I back up all of my important Bitcoin wallets. With that, let's dive into the list. Now, the list here will be in no particular order. I'm going to be starting with some of the more familiar devices that you may have already heard of, and then moving into some that you may not have heard of, but should probably pay attention to. Also, it should be noted that all of these devices in some capacity allow you to focus on Bitcoin only, either by not downloading certain apps, or by upgrading to a different type of firmware, or a device may just come out of the box Bitcoin only. And the reason this is important is that by supporting altcoins and making support for all of these different chains, you open yourself up to more attack vectors. All right. It makes your device less secure. So, I deal with Bitcoin only. That is my focus. But even if you are holding altcoins, I highly recommend that you hold your Bitcoin on an entirely separate device to keep it the most secure. With that said, let's dive into the first entry. The Trezor is one of the oldest, longest standing entries on the list today, and they've got one of the longest track records out there, given that they've been in the space for so long. They do have a native desktop app from which you can manage your funds, known as Trezor Suite. The Trezor can also be used on mobile, but only with Android phones because it must be wired in, and Apple phones aren't a big fan of supporting third-party devices. Also, if you're using it with Android, you're going to have to use a third-party app, as Trezor does not have a native app for mobile as of recording this video. However, speaking of third-party apps, Trezor is wildly compatible with a ton of different options when it comes to desktop apps, things like Spectre and Sparrow and Wasabi, just a ton of them. So that gives you increased optionality if you're not a fan of Trezor Suite and you want something with a few more bells and whistles, you can check that out. Now, Trezor also has Bitcoin-only firmware as an upgrade. So you can go to shop.trezor.io/BTC-only. I know that's a mouthful, but you can look it up as well. And you can download Bitcoin-only firmware, which removes all altcoin functionality, plugging those potential security holes that could come with supporting them. So you can choose if you'd like to do that. I highly recommend, as I said in the intro, to upgrade to anything Bitcoin only when that option is available. Now, one of the criticisms of the Trezor is that it does not have a secure element. A secure element is a special chip residing on the device that houses your seed phrase or your private key, which is also known as the keys to your money. And so what this means is if somebody were to get a hold of your Trezor and they had the know-how, some specialized equipment, and a little bit of time on their hands, they could potentially extract your seed phrase from this device. Now, it should be noted that you can prevent this attack in two different ways. You can add a passphrase, which is a function on the Trezor that you can enable, or you can use it as part of a multi-sig arrangement, which I'm not going to get into here, but has been covered on the channel quite extensively. So if you want to dive into that, just poke around the channel for multi-sig. Either way, it is up to you as the user to decide if the usability of this device is a decent trade-off for the lack of a secure element. Now, I will say overall, this is probably one of the easiest and most user-friendly options that I've seen out there, and it definitely deserves a spot on this list because of that. And I do use it in a variety of different instances myself. I really like the touchscreen on the Model T, which is what you see here. But if you are a little strapped for cash and you want a cheaper option, they do also have the Trezor Model 1, which is a previous option, which goes for quite a bit cheaper and instead does not have a touch screen, has a smaller screen and has just two buttons instead. So you might have a few extra clicks in executing different functions, but more or less it does the same thing. So be sure to check it out. I do have a full tutorial on my channel covering how to set it up with Trezor Suite if you see fit. And yeah, Trezor again, another great entry on this list. The Ledger is another one of the oldest and longest running hardware wallets on the market, which is a reason why they have such a large customer base and so many users. They have offered a variety of different products in the past. Some have been pretty damn good and some have been not so much in my experience. However, their newest entry, the Ledger Nano X, is a pretty solid hardware wallet. It hosts a native desktop app known as Ledger Live And that Ledger Live application is also available on mobile. And when I say mobile, I mean both Android and iOS. The reason this is possible is because that the Ledger Nano X uses Bluetooth to connect to your phone, which means it doesn't have to plug in to an iPhone and thus can be compatible. Speaking of compatibility, it is also one of the most widely compatible, along with the Trezor, Bitcoin wallets out there. Basically, if you've got a desktop application that supports Bitcoin and Bitcoin only on your desktop, you're going to be able to use the Ledger Nano X with it, alongside the Trezor, as I mentioned before. Now, in terms of Bitcoin only, as I just mentioned, you can do it with the Ledger. However, it's not quite Bitcoin only. And the reason I say that is because support for coins is added by adding applications. You load up apps onto your device. So you can just download the Bitcoin app, but the device itself still technically supports other coins and so doesn't get the full security of not allowing those things on it. And with that, there are potential security holes. So just keep that in mind. Now, the Ledger Nano X does have a secure element, whereas Trezor did not. So this is an important consideration for you. Then you may be looking towards the Nano X here. They also do have a cheaper option if you're a little strapped for cash. They have the Ledger Nano S, which rather than having two buttons on the screen and a larger screen, they're on the top. So there might be it's marginally more difficult to use, but when I say that, it's very, very minimal. It functions effectively the same when used on desktop. However, the cheaper option does not have Bluetooth. It can be wired to an Android phone if you have the right apps, but not to an iPhone. So keep that in mind as well. It also doesn't have this touch screen like a Trezor for either option. And I should mention, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that Ledger recently got a little bit of an egg on its face when they didn't have the greatest security practices with user data. So there was a leak and a number of mostly emails got leaked out. And so people have been getting spammy and scam emails from a lot of people that got a hold of that list. Of course, you can mitigate that by, if you're buying a Ledger, use a dummy email account and also use a PO box. And this should be standard practice when you're buying any Bitcoin related stuff. It's best not to let the world know if there's a data breach that you have Bitcoin possibly in your home. So keep that in mind as well. All in all, again, the Ledger is another solid addition, which is why it's on this list. Just consider some of the details here when making a decision of if you're going to grab it. Also, if you want to learn more about how to use it, you can head over to YouTube. I will list this in the show notes, but there's a full tutorial on how to use the Nano X with the desktop app. I also have an older one using the Nano X with your mobile device. The Coldcard is for the cypherpunks and the Bitcoin only purists out there that want their device to come Bitcoin native only, with no option to add altcoins, thus no option to add security holes. The Coldcard comes, as I said, Bitcoin only. You get some fancy, we'll call it calculator OPSEC here, because the thing is literally, it looks like a plastic calculator with a number pad. So those unfamiliar with it won't pick it out as a Bitcoin wallet. It does indeed boast a secure element. And the interesting thing about this one is it does not have a native app. So there's no Coldcard desktop app or mobile app to use with it. You must use it with a third-party piece of software. Now, in my opinion, I like this because, one, this means that there's multiple sets of eyes on it, both the company creating it and the wallets working to integrate it, which, in my opinion, gives a little bit more, I guess, don't trust, verify kind of ethos to it, in that the wallets that are implementing it are also keeping an eye on the source code and auditing it and making it compatible with their wallets. The other thing that I like about it not having a native app is it gives the creators of the device time to focus on just improving the device itself and not having to split up man hours to work on the app and add features and everything. They can just focus on making sure that the hardware is the best it can be. Now, it is in terms of using it itself, relatively simple to use in terms of how it works and everything. There's just a basic numeric keypad. You can see there's little up and down arrows, side to side arrows on the keypad itself, and then a simple check mark and an X if you want to approve or deny something. Outside of that, it's not super expensive. It's, again, I said it's got a secure element. You can do encrypted backups via SD card. And I should mention that this device can be either wired, meaning you plug it into a computer or potentially phone, Android only, or it can be air gapped. Now, what is air gapping? Air gapping means that from setup all the way through to creating and sending and receiving transactions, you never actually have to plug this thing into an internet connected device. You just need power. In fact, I'll scroll way down to the bottom here. You can actually power this thing with a 9-volt battery and never have it connected to a computer or phone at all through the entire life of using it, which is pretty cool. If you're thinking adversarially and you want the keys to your money to be safe and offline, this is a way to achieve it. Now, in terms of usability and ease of use, yes, if you're using it wired, it's going to be simpler. Using air gapping via an SD card is going to take a few extra steps. It's going to take a little bit more of a learning curve to get used to. So just be prepared for that. But if you're willing to put in just a tiny bit extra time and learn about that kind of stuff, it's really, really cool. And honestly, it feels really badass when you do your first what's known as partially signed Bitcoin transaction using an SD card going from computer to device. Now, as I said, it has the cold power to use it offline if you choose to do so. You can also do things like creating the seed to your money with dice. So not even trusting the device to generate your keys, but actually rather getting dice, rolling them, and creating your own backup phrase that way, which is, again, pretty damn cypherpunk if you decide to go that route. It's also super usable in things like multi-sig. It's got cool things like duress passwords. Again, just fun little things like the secure element. There's a little thing that says shoot this that lets you know what chip to destroy if you're getting rid of your device and you don't want anybody trying to get your seed phrase. And beyond that, again, super compatible. It works with a ton of different options. They've even got a list here that there we go. Bitcoin Core, Electrum, BTC Pay Server, Spectre, Wasabi, Unchained, Casa, Blue Wall, Sparrow, just a ton of different options. Very, very compatible, considering that it hasn't been around as long as Ledger and Trezor, but has support from a ton of different Bitcoin wallets out there. I really, really enjoy the Coldcard. Now, it's not for everybody. You know, if somebody wants the simplest option and they don't want to do a ton of extra learning, and you know, it can be difficult learning a device and then learning a separate piece of software, and you kind of got to fill in the gaps of not having the software walk you through everything about it. So there's that. But as a learning tool, I do recommend that even if it's not your first hardware wallet, people do dabble with the Coldcard at some point, because it will teach you a lot about Bitcoin and make you a better Bitcoiner. It should also be mentioned that I do have a full tutorial on the Coldcard using Wasabi wallet for setup, and I go through things like air gapping. I actually do the air gap part first, and then I go through the wired connection second later in the video. So up next, we have the Keystone Wallet. And putting aside the fact that Keystone is a sponsor of the show, and I should note that I was the one that reached out to them for that, I genuinely believe that the Keystone is a solid and excellent hardware wallet that everyone should take a look at and at least consider. Now, out of the box, this thing comes as a multi-coin device, but you can upgrade to their Bitcoin-only firmware. I highly recommend you do so. This is a one-way function, and I do say upgrade, meaning an upgrade. It is better to have the Bitcoin-only firmware, in my opinion. Again, you have the added security upgrades with that, and the reason this is a one-way solution, meaning that you can't downgrade back to the multi-coin firmware, is because they don't want you undoing the security measures that you've enabled. Also, upgrading to Bitcoin-only firmware allows you to do things like multi-signature and partially signed Bitcoin transactions, aka air gapping, and that is not part of the multi-coin firmware. So they don't want you having functions and then revoking them and potentially not being able to access Bitcoin that you have in a multi-sig later on. So keep that in mind when you're upgrading. But again, if you're using this as your Bitcoin HODL stash, then that should not be a consideration for you in the first place. Now, this device is, I've got to say, pretty robust. It feels pretty premium. It has a touch screen. It has a fingerprint scanner to unlock. It has a detachable and rechargeable battery. It has an SD card slot, and it also has a secure element in it. So if that's a consideration for you, then there you go, secure element on board. Now, it does have a native app that you can use with the device. However, I much prefer, to be honest, using third-party software with it. Something like Blue Wallet on mobile, or Wasabi, or Spectre, or Sparrow, or Lily Wallet, or whatever on desktop to use alongside the Keystone. To be fair, that's also what I prefer with every single other one of my hardware wallets. Now, the interesting thing I mentioned about the Keystone, it can do air gapping. In fact, that's the only thing it does. You never plug this device into anything. It doesn't even have a way to plug it in other than charging the actual rechargeable battery. Nothing else about the main device can be plugged in to a computer. So from the get-go, you create your keys on the device. Everything is done on the device itself, and it's all done via air gapping or partially signed Bitcoin transactions. Now, you can do it with the SD card, but this is the cool thing about the Keystone, is it's primarily meant to be used with QR codes. That is how you do air gap transactions with this. I do a full tutorial on how to do this over on my channel, and you can see how you set it up and utilize it. But I've got to say, air gapping a transaction with a hardware wallet via QR code and your phone is just, it's a dream. It is so simple. A few scans and you've got money sent off, and you've never plugged this into anything else. So the keys to your money are safely offline. You're not interacting in any other way other than just scanning using the phone on your camera or computer and the camera on the actual device itself. Now, another thing I wanted to bring up is this device is incredibly compatible with a ton of different wallets. Now, they don't list them all here on the website, but some good examples are Electrum, Blue Wallet, Spectre, Sparrow, Wasabi. I've used it with a ton of other options and featured it regularly in a lot of my wallet tutorials, and it is super easy and an absolute breeze to use with them. Again, kudos to Leishan and the team at Keystone. They've been really pounding pavement to get compatibility across a ton of great wallet options. Now, they do have a lot of other great features here. Again, the touchscreen is absolutely key here. It's nice and big. It's like a smartphone, right? It's like a small smartphone. The detachable and rechargeable battery is great. Although I will say it does tend to drain quickly, so keep that in mind. And when you're done using it, I find that detaching the battery when you've got the device put away, it actually saves the battery more, because there tends to be a little bit of battery drain when it remains plugged in even after it's turned off. So if you find that, just detach the battery. Very nice to use. Okay, again, the micro SD card for firmware upgrading is super convenient. The fingerprint scanner is, again, super easy and nice to use. It does have a self-destruct mechanism, so if somebody tries to pull apart the device and extract your keys, well, hey, it's just going to self-destruct. So you have that security assurance alongside the secure element on it. It does also have, like the Coldcard, the dice option to generate your own seed. Multi-sig I already talked about, but this thing is awesome in a multi-sig, especially like a mobile multi-sig. Again, just super easy to use. And yeah, all in all, I really, really enjoy the Keystone. It is just a great wallet to use. Also, beyond that, I did want to mention something. Keystone is also formerly known as the Kobo Vault. And so some people, Kobo Vault was a sponsor of the show previously. There was a little debacle where effectively Lishan and his team, which were the ones that created the Kobo Vault, they were under the umbrella of a company in China called Kobo. However, the Kobo company decided that it wanted to lean towards custodial solutions, and they basically wanted to bring Lishan and his team under their umbrella and stop support for the hardware. Lishan and his team were not fans of this. They decided to buy up all of the IP around the Kobo Vault, and then created their own company called the Keystone. So they are now the heads of this company. They are in control of the device and everything about it. Now, they did the extra work and made firmware upgrades for the Kobo Vault so that it would be able to get the Keystone upgrades and get all of the new stuff moving forward. However, Kobo, the company, refused to allow Kobo users to upgrade, and at the same time discontinued support for the Kobo Vault. So that left a pretty bitter taste in a lot of people's mouths, as it should have. But I would place the blame solely on the Kobo company, not on Lishan and his team. So if you do want to hear exactly what went down there, I did a full interview with Lishan himself. You can find that on the channel, and we talk all about the transition from Kobo to Keystone. But with all of that aside, damn, Keystone is a badass wallet, and I gotta tip my hat to them. They've been putting in the work, so be sure to check this one out. The Foundation Passport is the newest option on the list, and also one of the newer hardware wallets out on the market. They've made some big strides in the past year. Now, this device is Bitcoin only native, meaning out of the box it is already Bitcoin only, and there is no option to add altcoins to it. It's also air gap only, just like the Keystone. So you can do this like the Keystone with QR code or SD card if you so decide. The design of the actual device itself, as you can see, it's basically like a pretty robust old Nokia cell phone, but it feels more premium than that. It's actually a pretty nice looking device. It also runs on AAA batteries, which have a pretty damn good life cycle, I've got to say. The batteries did last quite a while in this thing. Part of that is because the screen is not too intensive. It's not a touch screen. It's got buttons like a regular old cell phone as well, and the screen itself is not color. There's no haptic feedback or anything like that. It's basically, it gives you what you need to operate the device, but don't expect like fancy graphics or anything on that, which you don't really need when you're utilizing this. Now, you already know from the last entry that I do love the QR air gapping here, and this thing is no exception. It works beautifully. It's wonderful, especially using it with a mobile device as well, but it does work fantastically with a ton of options on desktop. And speaking of what it works with, this again, this entry here does not have a native app, so you're going to be using a third-party piece of software to utilize it, which is totally fine, and actually I kind of prefer that. Now, in terms of everything else, these menus that I mentioned here, if they look familiar, there's a reason, and that's because the Foundation team based a lot of this on the source code for the Coldcard. So if you're familiar with that flow, then it's going to be more or less the same here, just with some added functionality around the QR code air gapping. Now, there was some drama around this between Foundation and Coldcard, but honestly, I'm not going to focus on any of that. I'm just commenting on the actual experience and the device's usability. Now, in terms of compatibility, this thing is compatible with a ton of different stuff. Bitcoin Core, Blue Wallet, BTC Pay, Electrum, Sparrow, Spectre, Wasabi, tons of other ones that all deal with partially signed Bitcoin transactions using either QR codes or micro SD. You're going to find a fair amount of compatibility there. And I'm sure there's more in the roadmap, but they've done a lot in a single year. So again, kudos to them for that. Now, in terms of price point here, this is one of the more expensive ones on the list. I mean, you can feel it in your hand. It is pretty robust, but I will say that this price point is better than it has been previously. They just dropped it by $100. The first round of these that went out was $300. It's now $199. So if you're happy with that price point, then this might be a good option for you. Either way, this thing is fantastic to use. I've used it extensively as well, particularly with mobile air gapping via QR code. Again, can't speak highly of it enough. And a multi-sig with something like this and the Keystone side by side, I've got to say it feels pretty good. So again, Foundation, hat tip to you guys. Some pretty hard work over the past year, and I look forward to seeing what you guys do in 2022 with your next batch of shipments. And of course, if you're looking for it, I do have a full tutorial on the Foundation Passport, and I show how to use it with Blue Wallet and a couple other things as well. So you can check that out. The final entry on this list, admittedly, is not one of my most regularly used hardware wallets, but I really wanted to include it because I do believe it is a solid entry on this list, and it's used by a lot of great Bitcoiners that I know and respect. I have had the chance to play with it, of course. I think it just boils down to personal preference here. The device itself is a small USB-C device, so you do plug it in. There's no air gapping here, but you can plug it directly into your computer or your Android phone. It has touch buttons located at the top and the bottom of the device. So the touch sensitive, you don't actually see any buttons. The way that you know where they are is the device itself, once plugged in, will have little arrows pointing to where to touch. And it actually is quite intuitive as you get to use it. Now, as I said, you can use it desktop and Android. It does have a native app for both, and I will say that the app is probably one of the cleaner options when it comes to native apps. It's probably equally good to something like Ledger Live, which is probably one of the best ones out there. It is also cross-compatible with other options. So you can see it's compatible with Electrum, Spectre, and Sparrow. I would like to see this list grow. I actually do believe that there are some more options. The website just in this particular instance hasn't been updated yet, but I would like to see more compatibility with this thing. It also does some other cool things, like it's got a micro SD backup, as do a number of the other ones, not the Trezor and the Ledger, but some of the other ones in the list here. and an all-around pretty good choice. They also, as I was mentioning, they do have Bitcoin only that you can do as an upgrade, okay? And so I highly recommend you do this. This opens up things like multi-sig, and it makes sure that you can't downgrade and all that kind of stuff. So it's pretty solid. They've got I believe a secure dual chip. So yeah, they've got their secure element on this as well. All in all, pretty good. And also with that native app, easy connection to your node if you're running a Bitcoin node, which is something that is lacking or not super easy with something like the Ledger and the Trezor in their native apps. I found it to be a bit more of a pain and not as easy to connect, whereas with the Bitbox, it's pretty much copy, paste, go. So all in all, I think it's a pretty solid entry. Again, I've utilized it a bunch just in testing, and overall, I think it's pretty good, and I recommend giving it a consideration when you're looking into getting a hardware wallet. You can check out the full tutorial if you want to see a little bit extra on the channel. So there you have it. That was my top 6 list for Bitcoin hardware wallets for the year 2022. And to be honest, there is currently nothing else on my radar that I would even consider keeping any meaningful amount of Bitcoin on. Now, of course, this can change over the course of the year. That's why I do these once a year. Anything new that pops into my radar, I will potentially include in next year's list. But I think that more or less, if you're looking for a good Bitcoin hardware wallet, you can't go wrong with really anything here. It does boil down to personal preference in a lot of cases, but in terms of security, you're probably going to be all right with anything on the list here. Now, I'm curious on the part of the viewers here. Let me know which ones stand out to you on the list. Is there ones that you have? What have your experiences been? What do you like the most? What do you like the least even? Is there something that you don't like about this list? And also, please do let me know if there's anything that I missed. Is there a device that I should maybe consider adding here? Either way, I hope this list has been helpful, and be sure to check out all of the tutorials on these devices if you're looking further into getting one. There's going to be links down below for every single tutorial for each individual device, as well as links to purchase those devices. Now, you don't have to use those links if you're going to buy one, but I will say that it does help the show when you do. So, if you do, then thank you very much. And outside of that, please do let me know what you thought of the list. Thank you guys so much for watching. As always, please do hit like, subscribe, share. All of those things really help get this content in front of more viewers. And if it was helpful to you, also be sure to share it with anybody that you might think can benefit from it. If you want to help the show in another way, you can hit up the previously mentioned sponsors in the show notes down below. Those were Shakepay, LEDN, Bitrefill, Keystone, and the BillFodl. And if you really want to help the show, you can do a couple other things. You can hit up any of the links down below for these devices, or you can hit me up with a Bitcoin tip at either my Twitter page, it is enabled there, or my Strike page, which is strike.me/BTC sessions. You head there, you can type in any amount you like, hit the tip button, you'll be greeted with a Lightning invoice, or if you tap to the right, a regular Bitcoin QR code. With that, I am out. Have yourselves a wonderful day or evening wherever you may be. I'll see you guys next time for your daily session.
Hodl the Bitcoin.